Hello and welcome to eNow's webinar, Managing Encryption and Exchange Online, presented by Office 365 MVP Nathan O'Brien. Please send over any questions you have throughout this segment. We will save these for the Q&A portion at the end of Nathan's presentation. We will begin today's discussion with a brief word from Vice President of Sales at eNow, Richard Drulow.
Thank you, Gabby. Well, I'd start by saying there's absolutely no doubt on anyone attending this webinar that Microsoft is absolutely beating the street in expectations with fast adoption of Exchange Online and its Office 365 hybrid deployments. We're intimately knowledgeable around that because at eNow Software, we started developing hybrid and Office 365 cloud deployments for monitoring analytics way back in 2012. And so we've seen major clients like the City of San Francisco as a major client with 45,000 users deployed into Office 365. The challenges that revolved around that with the administrator were significant, and we were intimately involved in that. So today we're actually going to bring on Nathan O'Brien, who's an MVP in the Office 365 space and very knowledgeable with regard to what are the key challenges that we see today with Office 365 and Exchange Online deployments, and that's absolutely surrounding encryption. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nathan to the call and thank him very much for leading the conversation today. And thank you all for participating in today's webinar.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Nathan. As you can see up here on the screen, I'm an Office 365 MVP. I'm an Exchange MCSM, and by way of a day job, I am a consultant, mostly focusing on Exchange and Office 365 type migrations. A little bit more contact information for me up there on the screen. You can follow me on Twitter or see my blog there. All lovely stuff. So today we're going to talk about encryption in Exchange Online. I want to cover some reasons why you should be using encryption in Exchange Online. Oh, one second. I'm going to take over as presenter here. So I'm advancing the slides for everybody, not just myself. Work much better. All right, so here we go. So we're going to talk about encryption in Exchange Online, why you should be using encryption, some of the reasons that encryption is really helpful for you with your Exchange deployment, and we're going to cover 4 different types of encryption technology that's available for you in your Exchange Online tenant. For each of these types of encryption, we're going to talk about how to use it, how to set it up, how to configure it, how your users can use it, and what the best circumstances to deploy each type of encryption in are. I'm going to talk about TLS, OME, IRM, and SMIME, all 4 listed up there on the screen for you. So let's get started off with why you should be encrypting your email. As I think we can all agree, the vast majority of email that's sent out over the internet is sent in plain text. I think if we all took a moment right now and looked through our inbox, we'd see that there's a good deal of email in there that was probably sent out over the internet in plain text that maybe shouldn't have been. There's a lot of reasons why people don't encrypt email. I think the primary reason why is because it's hard. With an on-premises Exchange deployment, it is a lot of work to set up, deploy, manage, train your users, get this encryption all working and working well. As we move to Office 365, however, a lot of that back-end work is done for us. So there are some really good reasons why we should be encrypting email. First is compliance. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, so I'm not going to go into it too much here. Protecting organizational intellectual property. Say your organization is coming out with a fancy new widget, and you're talking to your manufacturing partners about this widget, sending plans and stuff. Those plans are going out over email, unencrypted over the internet. You're obviously putting your organization at risk. Somebody else could see that and beat you to market with that sort of thing. Security is kind of an overall thing. I think a lot of IT breaches that happen now and will be happening in the future really come down to social engineering, giving away too much information about your users and your environment. So that the bad guys, if they collect enough information, they can just call your IT department, pretend to be Sally in accounting, and ask to have her password reset, and then you've given them access to your own organization. So really, encrypting email can help you with that overall security so you're not bleeding out little bits of information over the internet. And then kind of the last reason I'm going to give you why you should be encrypting email today is, I think, probably for those of us on the call, the most important, expanding your job role. I hear from a lot of Exchange administrators worried about, hey, my company's moving to Office 365. What's that going to mean for my job? The answer to that is really it depends. If your job is justified by the fact that you apply patches, you do the backups, you restore backups, you replace failed hardware in your Exchange servers, you manage the hardware, that sort of thing, then you have good reason to worry with your organization moving to Exchange Online, because Microsoft is going to be taking over all that functionality. However, if you justify your job by really knowing the product, Exchange, and the other related products in Office 365, SharePoint, Skype for Business, how they all interact together, and really these deep features that can be fairly complex to set up and really take some intimate knowledge to run properly, then you're fine, really. Your organization is still going to need you for that sort of stuff. So let's move on and talk a little bit about compliance, super briefly here. So when I talk about compliance with a customer, I kind of like to break it down into 4 main areas. I do often have reason to interact with customers about their compliance when I'm doing a migration. They will ask me, for instance, we have PCI compliance issues. How can we be PCI compliant with our email? And the answer to that really is it depends. I, as a technical consultant, can't really write those policies for your organization, but what I can do is once your organization writes those policies, I can help you with a technical solution implementing that to ensure that your organization does follow those policies. Part of that certainly can be encryption, but when I have these conversations with customers, I kind of like to break it down into 4 main areas, first of which is retaining and removing data. So that's, keeping the data that you need in your Exchange organization and removing the data that you don't need. Second is discovery, actually finding the data that's relevant to your particular case. And then the last 2 are what we're going to focus on here today. Those are protecting your information against disclosure. Obviously, when you send that unencrypted email over the internet, bad guys can get a hold of it. And then protecting your data against misuse. So maybe you send a company-wide announcement about, you want to make sure everybody in your organization knows about the shiny new product that's coming out next week, but you also want to ensure that, there's not a disgruntled employee that's going to forward that on to CNN maybe or something like that. So in this webcast, we're going to be focusing on those last 2, protecting against disclosure and against misuse. We're going to start off talking about TLS, that's Transport Layer Security. TLS works very much like a VPN tunnel for email. It's a point-to-point encrypted tunnel between 2 messaging organizations that keeps the message traffic over that encrypted while it's passing over the internet. Good way, VPN's a kind of a good analogy for that, except TLS uses PKI encryption, public key encryption, so it can be a little confusing. I think people understand okay with TLS that it's the receiving party's certificate that we're using to encrypt the mail. So if I send an email to you, you have to have the SSL certificate set up on your organization for me to be able to encrypt that and send it to you. That's an artifact of how SSL and public key encryption works. That's fairly easy for people to understand at this point with TLS, but a little bit of a spoiler alert, we're going to have that same concept come back in another one of the encryption technologies we're going to talk about a little bit later. And there it's a little more confusing for people, so hopefully mentioning it here will make it just a little bit clearer for you. Another thing I want to talk about with TLS is Domain Secure. Domain Secure is an on-prem feature became available in Exchange 2010. It works with TLS to give clients notification that that particular email is being delivered securely over the internet. To set up domain secure requires mutual TLS. Both organizations set up TLS, and they do go through edge servers, edge transport servers. So it's not very widely used on premises, but the reason why I wanted to bring it up here is because it's not used at all. It's not available in Exchange Online. So when we set up our TLS connections for our users, there really is no notification to the user that they're sending an email that's going to be encrypted over TLS. That's something that you're going to, as the administrator, you're going to have to communicate to your user base separately. Tell them that when they send email to contoso.com, we've set up TLS, so that email is going to be encrypted over our TLS encryption channel there. So let's talk about how to configure TLS here real quickly. Configuring TLS in your Office 365 portal, you can go to the Office 365 admin portal, Exchange, Mail Flow, Connectors. From that page in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see the plus arrow there that'll allow you to add a new connector. When you hit that Add a New Connector, it's going to bring up the New Connector Wizard, which you can see pictured there on the screen now. On this first page, what you're going to want to do is select from Office 365 and to a partner organization for this TLS connector. On the next page, you're going to give your connector a name and a description. Here we always recommend that you be descriptive as possible. Make sure that not only you understand what you're doing with this, but that somebody else can come in after you and understand. Moving along there, through this wizard, you want to hit the checkbox to turn it on. And then on the next page of the connector, you're going to want to specify the domains that you're using with this connector. I probably recommend in most cases that you want to keep each connector to a single domain. It makes it easier to troubleshoot problems later. But you certainly could list a bunch of domains here if you wanted to group a bunch of domains here. You can see on the screen I set up one to contoso.com. On the next page after this, which I don't have a screenshot for, you're going to want to specify to route the messages via the MX record or to specify a specific smart host. I think in most cases you're going to want to route via MX record. And then on this page after that, you're going to select to always use TLS. This is, of course, where you're forcing this particular connection to use TLS so that email going to this organization is always encrypted coming from your Office 365 tenant. At the bottom there, you can check the box and verify that that particular partner organization has the proper certificate with domain name listed on it. After you click Next here, you're going to get a final settings page. You're going to go through, tell you everything that you've selected, and then it's going to run a validation wizard. It'll ask you to input an email address, joe@contoso.com, and Office 365 will test your connector for you and verify that everything's working properly. Once that's done, you'll know that you have a valid TLS connector set up, and you can send email to this partner organization that will be all encrypted as it goes over the internet. So when is using TLS the right choice, the right encryption solution? If you have a bunch of users in your organization that are sending a good deal of messages to a partner organization that really should be encrypted as they're going over the internet, TLS is a good choice. It allows you to set up encryption for your users that your users don't have to do anything. You know, if you're sending an email to Contoso, you've set up that connector, you can rest assured that all those emails going to contoso.com will be encrypted as they go over the internet. And you can set up a TLS connector like this between two organizations that are both in Office 365. I don't know, in most cases that's not really going to do a whole lot for you. For instance, if I were to send an email to the guys at eNow, we're both Office 365 tenants, we're both here in North America. That message probably isn't going to go out over the internet, but if you'd like to set up that connector just to be safe and ensure that if it were to go over the internet, it would be TLS encrypted, you can certainly do that. Let's move on to our next encryption technology. We're going to talk about Office 365 Message Encryption, OME. OME is probably the closest to what users would think about when they think about encrypting email. It gives users the ability to send an email to a recipient on any messaging platform. They certainly don't have to be on Office 365 or Exchange. As you can see in a couple slides, I tested this, sending myself an encrypted message to my Gmail account. Any mail platform works fine and allows you to secure these messages. It does this by sending the recipient a link that they can basically log back onto a web portal where they'll be able to read your message, and that recipient can then in fact reply to your message, and that entire conversation thread will remain encrypted the whole way. The recipient does not have to have an Office 365 license, anything like that. It's all taken care of by your license. Triggering OME currently is only available through transport rules, which we're going to show you how to set up. There is nothing in either Outlook or OWA, now called Outlook on the Web. A little cumbersome name there, but there's no button in either of those platforms that allows you to trigger OME. We use transport rules to kick that off. Microsoft's aware of that shortcoming, and I expect that may change in the relatively near future, but we don't have any exact timeline when there'll be an alternate way to kick this off. So we're going to show you how to configure OME. First thing you have to do is to turn on rights management. This is also going to apply to the next technology, IRM, that we're going to talk about. So I'm only going to go through this part of the setup once, and when we get there, we'll ask you to imagine we're going through all this again. Just turn on IRM in your Office 365 tenant. You can go to Service Settings, and then you can see Rights Management there. You click on that. You're going to get this screen here on the right-hand side, and just hit that little Activate button to activate Rights Management on your Office 365 tenant. Of course, you need the appropriate licensing for that, and we're going to talk about those Advanced Features button a little bit later. After you activate IRM, Rights Management, on your Office 365 tenant, you do have to set up your RMS online key sharing location. It does vary by the location of your tenant. If you're in North America, command is up there at the top. You can see European Union and Asia. Commands vary a little bit for where you're setting up your tenant. And then there's two more PowerShell commands that you'll need to run in PowerShell. Connected to your Office 365 Exchange Online tenant. You want to import the RMS Trusted Publishing domain, and then you want to set IRM configuration, internal licensing enabled, to true. Once you've gone through all that, you're going to have OME will be available for your Office 365 tenant. Next thing you're going to want to do is set up a transport rule. This transport rule, again, is going to be used when specific circumstances are met. Your message will go through OME. You can see here, I set up a transport rule so that when the subject includes the word secure and the recipient is outside of my organization, that message is going to go through OME and it will be sent to that user, that recipient, encrypted. You can, of course, vary that if there's a different word you like to use, but I would recommend doing fairly close to this sort of setup. Once that rule is set up, you can go ahead and test it. Here in my Office 365 tenant, I sent this to my live account. I used the secure in that subject line, and we can see that this message goes out secure to off. Well, we'll see that in a couple slides. You can modify the OME branding on your messages. There are some commands here: get OME configuration and set OME configuration. Allow you to modify that OME configuration, give you a little additional branding. Here you can see I ran get OME configuration. It gives you the options. You can add an image, specific email text, portal text, disclaimer text. All that is specified here. Here's the command. If you wanted to create specific default text, you could have, see, 10,024 characters, disclaimer text. All that's available in your OME, so that data information will be appended to each message that goes through OME. And then this is what that recipient, when I sent that email earlier, this is what the recipient will see. They'll get a normal email, as you'd see from me, but it has this attachment. When you click on that attachment, it will open up this portal. You'll be taken to a web portal where then the user has the ability to read that encrypted message, and then they can reply to it if they like. They don't need, again, any sort of Office 365 licensing at all to have that conversation go on between you and them, encrypted. I see there's a couple questions there. I'm going to save those to the end. I'm bad at reading and talking at the same time. So when is OME the right choice to use? When you have users and you want to make it available for them to send secure email, but not terribly technically sophisticated users. S-MIME, we're going to talk about coming up here in a little bit, is another encryption technology that users can use to send email, but it really requires the users have a lot more knowledge of how everything is working and how everything's going on. OME also, again, allows recipients to be on any messaging platform. Because it's using that web portal, it doesn't matter. You can be on Zimbra or any portal at all. Users will need to create an account on Live, or they can use a one-time password to log into that portal. Basically, they're just required to verify that the email address that they get is their own email address. So it works best if they create an account, a Microsoft account, but they can use a one-time password to do that without creating an account if they'd like. And then again, users and recipients don't really have to have the technical sophistication that's required for S-MIME. Moving on to rights management, RMS. This is our third encryption technology that we're going to talk about. Rights management isn't really about encryption, but it uses encryption to solve the problem. What rights management does is it encrypts the message and then enforces specific rights that you define on those messages so that the recipients have restrictions on how they can use those messages. There are various templates that are pre-set up for you. We'll talk about those in a second, that come with default rights, but you can also go in and modify and create new templates so that you can apply different rights and make those different rights available to other users in your Office 365 tenant. One of the real drawbacks, though, to RMS is that it, for the most part, especially in Exchange Online, most of the functionality is really only available within your tenant. So there's not a lot of RMS functionality that if I were to send an email to one of you outside of Office 365 or even in a different Office 365 tenant, really a lot of that functionality doesn't work that way. It's meant to work within your tenant. Here are some RMS features, options that are available. I put this up because it is important to call out that there are different licensing options for RMS. You can get RMS with your Office 365 subscription at the right licensing level. It's certainly available at E3. It can also be purchased separately if you have a lower plan than that. But RMS within Office 365 has that set of features listed for you on the left-hand column, but there are some new additional snazzy features that have been added to the RMS that's available through EMS or Azure RMS Standalone. That is a different licensing option, and it does give you some nifty options here. Users can track usage of their documents. It integrates with on-premises file shares through an RMS connector, and it allows author of a document to revoke access to the messages and documents that are sent out at any time. So if I send an email with an attachment to everybody on this call, and then an hour later I decided that I didn't want Joe to have access to that attachment, using this nifty new RMS app that I'm going to show you in a second, I could revoke the access from a specific person or from everybody to that document. Configuring RMS, again, like I told you with OME, the setup, we have to go through those first setup steps. We activate RMS, set up our key sharing location, and we come back here, have to hit activate there in the rights management. It's much the same as OME. After we get that configuration done, we do have 3 default templates that are created for us in our Office 365 portal. First one is called Do Not Forward. That template, if you apply it to a message, will work across Office 365 tenants. So I could set up a message with that Do Not Forward template, and I could send it to one of the folks at eNow, and then they would be able to read that. It would all work for them, but they would not be able to forward that message. The next 2 templates that are set up for you by default are named Company with the company name that you define in your Office 365 tenant, and then dash Confidential, which allows the recipient to view, reply, save, and edit the message, edit and forward the message. And then Confidential View Only, Company Confidential View Only is the 3rd template that the recipient only has the rights to view that message. If those 3 templates aren't adequate, if you want more advanced features in those templates, that's what this Advanced Features button is for. You can go ahead and click that, and we'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. And then it allows you to edit those. Well, you can add additional templates that have additional functionality. So here you can see in my template, I took the Confidential View Only template that's by default set up for you. I made a copy of that, and then I edited it so that it expires in 2 days. So if I were to send somebody in my tenant a message with that RMS template applied, they would have all the rights of all the restrictions of the Confidential View Only. They'd be able to view that message, but they couldn't reply or any of the other rights. But in addition to that, that message would expire after 2 days. There are a few other features that you can configure in this Advanced Features section. As I mentioned, there is this snazzy new RMS Sharing App. It can be found at portal.azurerms.com. And a couple slides ago, there you can see there's a couple of features of this new RMS app that are available in preview in Office 365, but that will end, and then you'll need to purchase RMS via EMS, Enterprise Mobility Suite, if you want to have these additional features. After you install that app that you can find at that web page, see this top screenshot, I just right-clicked on a Word document that was on my desktop, and then you can apply RMS templates to that. You can share that protected. It'll take you to a portal that will allow you to send that out. Or the last button there, you can see the track usage. If you click on track usage for a document, it'll take you back to that Azure RMS portal, and then you'll see a nifty screen that shows everybody that has accessed that document. It'll show you where they've accessed it from, show you information about how many times they've accessed it, and it allows you to remove people's access from right there in that web portal. Handy new features. So using RMS, as I've said, the templates that start with company confidential, and company view only are only usable within that tenant. Those, if I were to create a message, apply that template, and then send it to somebody outside of my tenant, they wouldn't be able to access those messages at all. The Do Not Forward template can be used with other Office 365 templates, but it wouldn't work for non-Office 365 mail systems. If I sent that do not forward template to somebody with on-premises Exchange, for example, they wouldn't be able to read, they wouldn't be able to access that message at all. Bring your own key. That's a feature that is available in Azure AD, but currently does not work with RMS in Office 365. People do ask about that sometimes. Bring your own key allows you to import your own encryption key into Microsoft's key management system so that you can have that little extra layer of confidence in your encryption. It wouldn't keep Microsoft from accessing your data if for some reason that they decided to break their policies and access your data. They would still have the key, so they could decrypt your data if they really wanted to. That would violate their policies. But what Bring Your Own Key does do for you is if sometime in the future you decide that you want to revoke a key, you can cancel that key, and at that point, then no one would be able to access data that had been encrypted with that key, including Microsoft. So that Bring Your Own Key feature, some people are interested in that. Not currently available for Exchange Online RMS, but I believe Microsoft is working on that. In RMS, here I like to bring up that it's not really foolproof. RMS does prevent users from taking, or it can prevent users from taking screenshots of messages and that sort of thing. Disable the snipping application within your desktop, but it's not 100% foolproof, and it shouldn't be considered that way. It should be considered as helpful guidelines to help your users better follow your policies, but it's certainly not completely going to enforce those for you. It's not a fire and forget. If somebody really wants to find a way around your policies, RMS isn't technically 100% going to keep them from using that information improperly. The last thing I wanted to say that all these templates, those 3 default templates, and any additional templates that you create for RMS are usable within other Office applications. They work with SharePoint Online in your Office 365 tenant, and you can use them to encrypt Word and Excel documents, PowerPoint documents, all that is usable there for you. So when is RMS the right choice? When you have sensitive information that needs to be protected internally. Say we have a Word document that includes, information about the new product that we're coming out. We need to share that internally with the people in the company, but we want to ensure that that information isn't misused by our employees. Somebody doesn't quit and take it with them to their next employer, that sort of thing. Also allows us to ensure that users have time-limited access to documents and messages. Again, we can expire those RMS messages after an amount of time, so that gives us another option there. And again, RMS should be considered as a tool to assist users in following policies, but it's not the end-all, be-all. There are ways around it. If users really want to take your information and misuse it, RMS isn't 100% of the time going to completely stop that from happening. So let's move on to our 4th encryption technology we're going to talk about today, SMIME, Secure Multipurpose Internet Mail Extensions. SMIME was developed in the mid-90s, and by the end of the 90s, it became an accepted standard. It's really the most complex encryption technology that we're going to talk about here and is available to you in Exchange Online. SMIME has 2 real major functionalities. It allows you to add digital signatures, and it allows end-to-end message encryption. So let's talk about those digital signatures first. Oh, nope, obstacles to using SMIME. Got a little ahead of myself. So SMIME is fairly complex. Not all messaging software supports SMIME. For instance, I can't necessarily send an email message to someone on Lotus Notes that is encrypted with S/MIME and expect that to work. It may not work with other foreign messaging systems. S/MIME encryption is done at the client, so that message traffic isn't inspected during the transport stack, which may mean consequences of that may mean that maybe your antivirus can't function for that message because it's encrypted before it gets to antivirus. Or maybe you have transport rules that you expect to apply to all messages that are going through. Maybe adding a disclaimer to messages. That's a very common transport rule that people use. But S/MIME encryption can prevent that from working because the message is already encrypted before it gets to that transport stack. And then the last obstacle that I want to talk about to using S/MIME is that it does require an SSL certificate be installed on the client machine. This can be really difficult, especially these days. I personally don't just use email on one machine. I use it on a lot of machines. So if I want to use S/MIME, I have to have that same certificate installed and configured on multiple machines. Maybe some of those machines are my personal machines out of the purview of my organization's IT department. So that can be a bit of an obstacle for using S/MIME. If we don't have that SSL certificate installed everywhere, then we may not be able to use some of our messages. We certainly won't be able to use the S/MIME functionality and then go home, open up Outlook or OWA from our home workstation and not be able to access some of the messages that are in our inbox. Let's talk about S/MIME digital signatures. What a digital signature provides for you is authentication. It verifies who this message came from. It allows non-repudiation, which means that if I send you a message that has an S/MIME signature on it, I can't then later say, that wasn't me that sent you that message. You have a signed version of that proves it was me. It could only come from me. It also provides data integrity, which means that there's no way that data in that message could be changed in transmit. What S/MIME digital signatures do not provide, however, is confidentiality. That message is still unencrypted as it travels over the internet. Anybody could intercept it and read it. They just wouldn't be able to change it. Or if they did change it, it would be bore out. The digital signature wouldn't be valid. The signing process for S/MIME messages, when the message is signed, S/MIME takes that message, uses the sender's private key to create a hash, information about that message that is then appended to the end of the message. Output is a signature that's put on the end of the message so that it can be used by the recipient. The recipient uses that appended signature plus the public key from the sender, uses those together to verify that the message is what was sent and what was sent by that specific person, and it wasn't changed in transit. S/MIME message encryption provides a couple of different features, however. Provides confidentiality. Obviously, messages are encrypted in transit over the internet. No one else would be able to read them. And then it provides data integrity. Those messages obviously can't be changed as they're in transit over the internet, or the encryption does not, however, provide authentication or repudiation. With S/MIME, remember I talked about the encryption for TLS. When I send you a message that's encrypted over TLS, I'm using your certificate to send that message. The process is my server grabs the public key for your certificate, and it uses that public key to encrypt the message. The message is then transmitted to you, and you use your own private key that obviously only you or your Exchange server knows to decrypt that message. I said again, there's a future technology that we're going to talk about that uses that same concept, but it's a little more confusing for people. When we set up S-MIME encryption, that is so people can send us encrypted messages. Because of the way public key encryption works, the sender of that message is going to use my public key to encrypt the message and send that to me. So you install an SSL certificate on your machine so others can send you encrypted messages. You can use S-MIME digital signatures, however, to send digital signed messages out. So you install your own certificate to send those signed messages out, but you cannot send out encrypted messages with your certificate. You have to use the recipient certificate. Now that's a little confusing concept for people sometimes, but think about it for a couple minutes. It ends up working pretty well. You can use digital signatures and message encryption together on the same message. Provides all the benefits of each, the encryption and the signature together on the same message. So your message is really very secure at that point. It is recommended for additional security to use one SSL certificate to sign the message and a separate certificate to encrypt the message. Though I don't think I've ever seen anyone go that far. Sure, someone has. Maybe some government organizations that really want to ensure their messages are safe. And then OWA, when you apply both signature and encryption to a message, OWA triple wraps that message. It means that it signs the message, then it encrypts the message, then it signs the encrypted message again. It's an extra layer of security that you can get from S-MIME in OWA. That does not work for the FAT Outlook client currently, but Outlook clients can read triple wrapped messages. So talk about configuring S-MIME. The configuration for S-MIME is, as I said, pretty complex. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly here. We've got about 15 minutes left in the hour. I'm going to show you the steps that I did to configure S-MIME. First of all, you need to get your SSL certificate. Up there on the screen, you can see startssl.com is a service you can use to get a free SSL certificate. I use that to set this up and play with. You're certainly an option for you. Or you can purchase an SSL certificate from any certificate provider there. Once you install that certificate on your computer, you're going to want to go to Cert Manager, highlight that certificate, and export it to an SST file. Here, I had to move the intermediate certificate to the same store as the certificate itself, so I could export them both together to get that SST file. That was an artifact of this Start SSL free certificate that I used. But doing that allowed me to create that SST file. Then there's a few commands that you need to run. Connect to remote PowerShell in your Exchange Online tenant. Run these commands, get content, and then that SST file name, encode it. Then you're going to set S-MIME configuration, load that certificate up. Then in Outlook, I'm going to go to Outlook File Options Trust Center Settings, Email Security Settings. This is a rather buried option in Outlook. When you get there, you're going to come up with, get this screen up. You'll be able to choose your signing certificate and your encryption certificate. Again, if you're using two separate certificates, this would be where you'd select those. Name your security settings. And then you can move on and use S-MIME. Another obstacle that I ran into setting that up, I do use my Outlook. I have two different email accounts in Outlook. I use my work account and my personal account, both Office 365 tenants. I had to remove my I think I removed my work account so I could set it up in Outlook with just my personal account. I think that's a known bug in Outlook. It's been an issue for a while and still is the case. You can use S/MIME with on-premises PKI. So you could build out your own public key infrastructure, your own certificate authority in Windows on-premises, and use that with your Office 365 tenant. That would work for you. It's a heck of a lot of work. It's a big project. Once you get that on-premises certificate authority set up, the process for installing the SSL certificate on each client is pretty much the same. It's the same as we just went through, but running your own certificate authority can be a bit of work. Using S/MIME in Outlook. Here you can see if you go to Options, More Options, then you get Security Settings. You can check those boxes to encrypt messages or sign them. And you can use S/MIME in OWA as well. From a new message, select the ellipsis there. I think I have a screenshot. Yeah, you can see from a new message, select that ellipsis in the upper right-hand corner. Show you message options. Then under options, you can select S/MIME, and you can select default options to encrypt and or sign all messages sent from that OWA session, that OWA computer. There is an S/MIME control in OWA, or I guess it's Outlook on the web. I'm still calling it OWA. Probably will forever. There's an S/MIME control that needs to be installed on each PC that uses S/MIME via Outlook on the web. It's an extra step that your users are going to have to go through, especially if they want to use S/MIME from their own computers. It's not too difficult, but something you have to make your users aware of. Here we can see an S/MIME message that I sent to Testy McTesterson. When Testy got that message, this is just signed, actually. No, this one's encrypted. He got that encryption, that gold lock there. If you signed a message, I believe it has a kind of a golden ribbon icon that shows there next to it when you receive that S/MIME signed message in your Office 365 tenant. So wrapping up for S/MIME, when is S/MIME the right choice to use? It's really good when you have a small number of highly technically sophisticated users that have very sensitive messages. S/MIME is still kind of cumbersome to set up and maintain for your users, even in Office 365. So it's not something that I would want to deploy for hundreds of users. But if you have C-level executives that really have sensitive information, or they want to sign messages, apply that non-repudiation, it'd be a good choice for S/MIME. It does require a IT staff that has good knowledge of encryption and how to set this all up. And if you do have sensitive messages that need to be secured from end to end, again, think about that transport stack. Maybe antivirus isn't going to apply to those messages as they go through transport. So be careful in using S/MIME. Before we wrap up here, there's a couple of Exchange encryption technologies that I wanted to bring up, mention as not working in Office 365. Office 365 is a great solution. A lot of stuff really does work very well, but these three things I've found don't work in Exchange Online. Journal report decryption is a feature that's used for e-discovery, for ensuring that your HR or legal department can read all the messages. Journal report decryption is not available in Exchange Online. I find that Outlook protection rules, which are much like transport rules, except they're pushed down to the Outlook client, I have the hardest time getting Outlook protection rules to actually work with my Exchange Online mailbox. And then, as I mentioned above, domain security. That TLS with user notification that the message is going out over TLS, that's not available in Exchange Online. It's only available in the on-premises version. So as we wrap this up, Talked about some reasons for you to encrypt your messages, why encryption in Exchange Online is a good idea to use. Then we talked about 4 different encryption technologies. Talked about transport layer security, allows you to set up that point-to-point, end-to-end encryption between 2 Exchange organizations. OME is kind of what users think of. It's the closest thing to what users think of when they think of encryption. It's a really easy to set up technology, very good to use for your organization. If you have users that need to encrypt messages, OME is probably the best solution, easy to set up, easy to use. We talked about IRM, Information Rights Management, that allows you to set usage rights for messages and Office documents within your Office 365 tenant. And then we talked about MIME, allows you to do really strong encryption, but kind of technically challenging to use still. So that's about all I have. We're going to go to questions. I see there are a few questions in here, so I'm just going to go up to the top. Let's see. So Ben had a question here. I understand there's a little complexity around migrating on-prem RMS protected email into Office 365 while enabling Azure RMS protection for email. Is it possible to enable Azure RMS to support OME without impacting existing on-premises RMS protected email? So the answer to your question, Ben, is no. It's a real pain. If you have that on-premises RMS infrastructure, transferring those messages, you need to make sure that your Office 365 tenant can access your on-premises certificate authority. Getting that set up and functional is kind of a pain. So takes a bit of work. Let's see. T-shirt for Ben. Todd had a question. Do recipients need to create a Microsoft Live account to access, open, read the encrypted messages? He's talking about Office 365 message encryption there. And the answer is no, they're not strictly required to. It does work better if they do create that, but there is now an option available that users can set up one-time passwords that would allow them to read, reply, use those OME encrypted messages without setting up a Microsoft account if they don't want to. I would suggest they do, though. Makes the process a little better. Yes, TLS uses port 587. See, Todd had another question here. Off topic, but if a Microsoft Live account is created using a company email address to read an encrypted message, and then that company later signs up for Office 365, will there be any issues as a result of creating the Live account? That used to be a significant problem. I know I did some early Office 365 migrations 4 years ago with like a college that had been using those Live accounts for various things, and that did cause quite a problem. I believe those issues are much easier to resolve now. I don't think I've run into a customer in that situation for a little while, but I don't think those issues are very difficult to resolve anymore. I believe that's fairly easily taken care of. John had a question. Can we review the supported Office 365 licenses at the end of each encryption method discussed? Obviously, we're a little bit past that. I'm not a licensing guy. Office 365 licensing is fairly complex. There's a lot of them. Government, education, enterprise, small business, they change fairly often. So I think the answer to your question is no. I don't pay attention to licensing. We have sales guys that it's their job to know all that stuff. I just make them work. What I can tell you is that the E3 license, all of that functionality is available with an E3 license. If you're using, it's also all available with the education and nonprofit versions of the E3 license. If you're using any of those licenses, all of that functionality will be available. If you're using a lesser license than that, I know Exchange Plan 2 licenses. Used to be, or maybe they are, about $8 a month. That's what I originally used for my Office 365 tenant before I was an MVP. I paid for it myself. I know that all that functionality worked with that license. But there's a bunch of other licenses in there that I don't know. There's a lot of licenses and a lot of complexity to that. Yeah, you have E2. I believe those would work. Another question from Pardeep. As we see the verb once, we do a tell. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're getting to the end of all the questions there. Does anybody else have any other questions? We've got just a couple more minutes left until the top of the hour. Be happy to address any other questions. Yes, there is certainly websites that will tell you all the different licensing options, and go ahead and look at those. I try not to memorize them because it makes my brain hurt. Do I need to have multiple certs if using multiple emails to send out emails, especially in the send as? So send as encryption, generally, the answer is that it doesn't work. That's not something that's going to function. You need to be sending encrypted email from your account. If you're talking about MIME specifically, I believe it's 100% only. You can send from your account. You need to be authenticated as that user to be able to send encrypted messages. So send as doesn't work for that. Happy to help. All right, we are approaching the end of our time here, so if we are out of questions, then I'd like to thank the guys at eNow for setting this up for us, and thank you all for joining us. It's been great.
Thank you, Nathan. We appreciate it. You guys can also look out for the slide deck and recording within 24 hours in your email. And for all unanswered questions from today's Q&A portion, you can email nathan@mcsmlab.com. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.